Electronic structure of an atom. We live in a world made up of different compounds. The oxygen that we breathe, the water that we drink, and the rock that we step on. These are all compounds. All of these are made up of basic particles called atom. Water, for example. Water molecules are made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. From the previous lesson, you already know what an atom is. But do you know what an atom is made up of? Atomic structure. An atom is made up of 3 smaller particles. The 3 subatomic particles are proton, neutron, and electron. Protons and neutrons are tightly packed together in the center of the atom called nucleus. The size of the nucleus is very small compared to the overall size of the atom. Electrons move around the nucleus just like planets orbiting the sun. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to describe electron arrangements of elements with proton numbers 1 to 20, draw electron arrangement of an atom in an element, state the meaning of valence electrons, determine the number of valence electrons from the electron arrangement of an atom. Click on the blinking button to proceed. Atomic structure. Around the nucleus are the atomic orbits or shells. Shells are numbered starting from the one closest to the nucleus. Like so, shell number 1, shell number 2, shell number 3, shell number 4, and so on. Electrons are arranged in these shells. Each shell can only allow a limited number of electrons.
Shell number 1 can only allow 2 electrons. When the shell is full, electrons will move on to the next shell. Shell 2 can allow up to 8 electrons. When you further learn about elements with more than 18 electrons, you will find out that shell number 3 can hold more than 8 electrons.
Shell number 4 can hold more than 8 electrons. Look at how the electrons are arranged. This table shows the atomic structure of the first 20 elements in the periodic table. Click on the blinking button to proceed.
Let's look at how electrons are arranged in an atom. Electrons will start to occupy the shells closest to the nucleus. Electrons will then occupy a new shell only after the previous one are fully occupied. Electrons occupying the outermost shell are known as valence electron. Now, how do we draw electronic structure of an element? We'll take carbon as an example. Are you ready? Let's begin. First, draw the nucleus of an atom with one shell surrounding it. We can identify the number of electrons based on proton number of the element. In this case, the proton number for carbon is 6. This means there are 6 electrons you need to fill in the atomic shell. Start filling the electron in the first shell. First shell can only occupy 2 electrons. Draw another shell for the remaining 4 electrons. Arrange the 4 electrons in the second shell. Second shell can take up to 8 electrons, so we don't have to draw the third shell. Lastly, write the electronic arrangement. Write the number of electrons in the first shell, dot, followed by the number of electrons in the second shell. Now we have a complete electronic structure of an atom. Why don't you try to identify the electronic structure of an element? We'll take lithium as an example. The proton number for lithium is 3. This means lithium has 3 electrons. Now where shall you put the electrons? The shell number 1 can only hold 2 electrons. Drag and drop 2 electrons to shell number 1. Now there is only 1 electron remaining. Do you know where to place it? You need to place the electron in shell number 2. Now we have the electrons arrangement of lithium. We can write its electronic arrangement, which is 2.1. 2 represents electrons in shell number 1, while 1 represents the number of electrons in shell number 2. Shell number 1 can only hold 2 electrons. Drag and drop 2 electrons to shell number 1. Shell number 2 can hold up to 8 electrons. Drag and drop 8 electrons to shell number 2. Now there are 2 electrons left. I believe you know where to place it. Drag and drop the remaining electrons to shell number 3. We have the electrons arrangement of magnesium. The electronic arrangement is 2.8.2. 2 represents electrons in shell number 1. 8 represents the number of electron in shell number 2, and the number 2 represents the number of electron in shell number 3.
Click on the blinking button to proceed. Activity. Let's get on the drawing board and start drawing some electronic structure. Create a complete electronic structure. Drag the nucleus shells and electrons and drop it into the column provided. After that, click Submit to check your answer. Click on the blinking button to proceed. Activity. Complete the table below with the correct number of electrons, electronic arrangement, and number of valence electrons. Click on the blinking button to proceed. Let's summarize our lesson. The electronic structure of an atom is defined as arrangement of electrons in shells around the nucleus. Atoms with proton number 1 to 20 are most stable with 2 electrons in shell number 1, 8 electrons in shell number 2, 3, and 4. Valence electrons are the electrons in the outer, most occupied shell. Click on the blinking button to proceed.